Like a lot of people, I became aware of this story of Dr. Cline through the Dr. Phil show. And to be honest, I was outraged then, and I'm still outraged at the sheer magnitude of this. And when I realised that there was a documentary about this on Netflix, I became really fascinated by this and really wanted to learn more. Obviously, I did think, well, what is this going to teach me that the Dr. Phil show didn't? But this does have a lot of kind of archives at its disposal, and you get to hear things in a less heightened emotional environment, because obviously with the Dr. Phil show, emotions are running high, everybody's kind of bubbling at the surface because of the nature of the show. It's basically like on screen therapy. With this one, it's obviously a lot more structured, a lot more edited, everything flows in a way that's allowing you to digest things at a much more steady pace. And I'm not going to tell you how bad things get, but I don't even think, even with the Dr. Phil show, I didn't realise quite how severe this was. If you're unaware of who Dr. Cline is, um, he was a doctor who in the 70s was doing fertility treatments for women who couldn't get pregnant naturally, either because of their husbands unable to conceive or just other complications. And it turns out that one woman decided that when she learned that she was from a sperm donor, she wanted to see if she had any half siblings. And she went onto this website, 23andMe, and you can put in your DNA and things and find out. And she quickly learned that there were, I think, 5 half siblings. And that shouldn't have been possible because Dr. Cline only ever used the donor sperm up to 3 times. So at the most, she should only have had 2 other half siblings, or up to 4 times three half siblings, something like that. But the numbers weren't right, so she looked into it. And the more she looked into it, and then they collectively began to look into it together, they realized that there were more and more of them with this exact or near exact DNA match. And it came to light that Dr. Cline, I feel wrong just calling him Dr. Cline. He doesn't deserve that title. Yes, he worked hard at medical school, but being a doctor, requires some kind of patient empathy, and he has none of this. Cline, from now on, had been using his own sperm for these fertility treatments, and one can only imagine was trying to create an army of his own genes. And I won't say quite how many individuals have come up over the years matching for his DNA, but bearing in mind they're all kind of in the same area, they're all in the same village or town or city, and even if they moved out, there are so many of them that there's still a very good chance that you could meet one of them, fall in love with them, have children with them, without ever realizing that you are half siblings. And when you think of it like that, that's a pretty serious criminal offence what he is doing. Because you might think, well, if the person doesn't know who the sperm donor is anyway, would it really matter if the doctors? Obviously, yes, it matters, but if they ever found out, would it ever be a problem? Well, yes, actually, because it could cause a lot of health problems for the next generations and then generations after that, and it could just spiral, especially if everybody kind of continued to reside in the same close knit community. Because you can imagine how much inbreeding would happen over the years, and it's just horrific. But it's not just that, it's being lied to. We get to hear from both the children of the sperm and also, that's a great name for a rock band, um, but also from some of the mothers, some of the women who received these fertility treatments, and how it made them feel. And then we look at the fact that there are fathers. Um, there are some where the fathers, if I've understood this particular one rightly, um, they had to use the father's sperm. The biological father is in the one the child also grew up with, um, but it had to be implanted, or it was she was a test tube baby or something. I can't remember exactly, but either way, they thought that her father that she'd grown up with, she thought that she was his biological daughter. Um, But it turns out that actually he had used his own. He had basically taken this biological father's sperm, chucked it out, and used his own instead. And this father then had to find out 30, 40, however many years later, that this child he had raised and loved thinking she was his own flesh and blood wasn't. Obviously for the mothers, still their flesh and blood, but you still feel disgusting when you think about what this man has done. There are so many people affected by this in so many different ways, depending on whether you're the birth mother, the supposed biological father, the child of this. There are, so many questions, so many people who need answers, and obviously it looks at what happens once he began to be questioned and the media began to hound him. And I don't want to go into too much detail about any of that because I don't want to spoil it, because it is shocking. But I will say that the documentary is very well edited, it's very well presented. The people who we get to hear from are, I was going to say very pleasant to listen to. That sounds a little bit too flippant for the severity of what they're saying, but they're very articulate. They're very, passionate about this cause in terms of getting the word out. And there is one word in this where we find out that Cline said, "The world doesn't need to know." And they've flipped that on their head and said, oh yes, they do. And with the Dr. Phil show and with this, they're making sure that he does not get his wish. And I think that that's brilliant. So it's brilliant that the documentary exists, and the courage that some of these individuals have is fantastic. And I can't imagine this would ever be an easy journey for any of them. And I just thank them for telling their story, because these things, I feel like hopefully today these things would be less likely to happen, but at the same time I don't think it would be impossible. Yes, there are more regulations in place, but I still think that these things could happen, so it's important that these stories are told so that they don't happen again. And it's a really enjoyable watch for the right reasons. When you find out that these people are getting justice, they're getting the word out, they have met half-siblings and things, which is obviously a lovely thing in a way, because there are other people who relate to them, but it's just unfortunate that the circumstances are so negative. But I think it's a really enjoyable documentary, put together really well, directed by Lucie Jourdan, and definitely one that's worth watching if you like true crime or anything that's a little bit bizarre. Cline is a name that I don't think I will ever forget. This documentary is very well edited, very well put together, very moving, absolutely worth watching.